In Dawn of War 4, and for the very first time in the history of the series, the Adeptus Mechanicus officially arrive as a fully playable faction. Their inclusion alone speaks volumes about how far they have risen within the wider Warhammer 40k universe, where the Mechanicus existed only in community-made mods or brief narrative appearances. But now, they finally take center stage with a complete campaign, a full unit roster, and a playstyle that seems unmistakably their own. In today's video, we are going to go through what we already know, and some new things that I've figured out by ultra zooming into Dawn of War trailer footage, also with a little help from some friends. Now let's start off with the Skitarii. They stand at the core of the Adeptus Mechanicus army. They are cybernetically enhanced soldiers that form the backbone of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Wired directly into the noosphere and with enhanced bionics, they can be split into Rangers and Vanguard, with each one representing a very slight different approach to warfare. Let's start with the Skitarii Rangers. They are the long-range infantry specialists. Their defining feature is the galvanic rifle, a precise, high-powered weapon designed to engage the enemy from a distance. Rangers want to deploy on the backfield objectives, sit in cover, and steadily chip away at the enemy. It looks like they'll work best when holding objectives or supporting other units from range because they are not especially durable on their own. I imagine a lot of enemy melee units will want to get right and close and personal to them just so they can take them out as soon as possible. Either way, now let's talk about the Skitarii Vanguard. So if the Rangers are the patient marksmen, then I guess the Vanguard are more aggressive shock troops. At least from what we know of them already, Vanguard look like they are designed to pressure the field a bit more than the Rangers and get a little bit closer. Their radium carbines are supposed to fire a high volume of shots, and their presence represents lethal radiation exposure rather than precise marksmanship. It looks like Rangers will be scoring points more safely from a distance, while the Vanguard are there more to force the opponent to react. Now, I don't think either unit is strictly going to be better than the other. They are kind of tools designed for different jobs. Well, slightly, because they are both ranged units, and I could see that many Adeptus Mechanicus armies could run a mix of both. Rangers probably hold objectives better and provide steady fire, while Vanguard move up with your main army to control the map and contest key areas. And something that you'll notice if you look really close at the details is that the Skitarii Rangers can fire behind cover. And you know what? If you look even closer than that, you're going to see some Skitarii Rangers holding the Transuranic Arquebus. It's known for their range, precision, and efficiency, and these weapons fire a shell of depleted transuranium. This allows it to puncture straight through a tank, and the wave of pressure created by the projectile will also pulp any biological creatures inside. You can see it has a tripod, setting up to do some wild damage. Big shout out, by the way, to my helpful helper, Norseland, who helps keep pointing these sorts of things out. Make sure you put a thumbs up for Norseland in the comments section below. At the end of the day, Skitarii Rangers and Vanguard are two sides of this same machine. One watches from afar, the other one advances a bit more closer to the fight, but overall, both are effective at range and will be relatively fragile in close melee combat. Because of that, I imagine you'll need to support them with more meatier units. Speaking of which, we've got the Sicarian Rust Stalkers that can do just the job, because these guys are meant to be elite operatives. They initially started as elite assassination squads for the Adeptus Mechanicus army, but they proved so effective at the art of killing that they were repurposed as frontline, physics-manipulating commandos. Their transonic weapons hum and resonate with sickening efficiency, passing through the strongest armor as if it simply didn't exist. Sicarian Rust Stalkers are also called shivs, a reference to the way that they repeatedly plunge their transonic weapons into their enemies, visible only as a blur of blue and arcing sprays of blood. These look like units that strike quickly, disrupt enemy formations, and withdraw before retaliation can arrive, perfectly embodying the Mechanicus' preference for precision over brute force. What I'm super excited to see are the combat director system kills for the Sicarian Rust Stalkers. They look like they get very close and personal into melee damage, and I can imagine what all sorts of shenanigans they could do against both smaller and bigger units alike. I guess only time will tell. Now, before we move on to some of the heavier units for the Adeptus Mechanicus, I would like to say a very heavy thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel, and if you have been enjoying the content and this video in particular, make sure you give it a thumbs up. It really does go a long way on the YouTube algorithm side of things, and make sure you are subscribed if you want to catch up with future videos like this. Either way, I appreciate all the support. Speaking of support, the Adeptus Mechanicus heavy support comes from the faction's formidable machines and servitor constructs. Castellan robots are among the most iconic, ancient relics of the dark age of technology, repurposed for modern war. Now, these automatons can usually be configured for sustained ranged suppression or brutal close combat dominance. Well, at least they can be in the tabletop from what I understand, so I kind of imagine it will be the same in Dawn of War 4. Of course, time will tell, but it would be very cool if the Castellan robots could have their gear customized, either for ranged or for brutal close combat. Now, it looks like from all the trailer footage too that the Adeptus Mechanicus will be deploying an impressive range of vehicles to extend their control on the battlefields. A great place to start is probably with the Onager Dunecrawler, which is looking like a long-range backbone of the army, reaching out across the map with heavy weapons that can threaten infantry, vehicles, and it seems from the trailer footage as well that you can have at least 2 different Dunecrawler loadouts in Dawn of War 4, and that alone tells us a lot about how flexible that this unit is likely to be. We see that some Dunecrawlers are fitted with heavy phosphor blasters. These are weapons that fire burning white luminogenic spheres that are supposed to cling to their targets, sizzling as they melt into flesh, armor, and exoskeleton alike. More often than not, it's these phosphor orbs that will probably deliver the killing blow. But I guess even when they don't, the glowing residue left behind is going to mark the target. And in gameplay terms, that could make for some really cool mechanics. Maybe things like support fire with debuffs, and making enemy units easier for the rest of your army to hit. Other Dunecrawlers in the footage are armed with eradication beamers, and these could be far more brutal, because they are typically a weapon that tears apart targets on a molecular level. It's supposed to be a widening beam type weapon, as well as something that becomes more devastating the closer that enemies push into it. So maybe it could create some lethal no-go zones on the battlefield. Either way, once it's in position, it looks like it's hard to dislodge, especially when the tech priests are nearby, keeping it repaired. I imagine that if you don't push Dunecrawlers forward recklessly, you plant them, you support them, then you can use them to slowly grind the enemy down from a distance. Then we have got the Skorpius Disintegrator, which I believe is much closer to what people think of as a traditional battle tank. Just filtered, of course, through the very interesting lens of the Adeptus Mechanicus. What makes the Disintegrator especially interesting is that it comes in 2 very different loadouts. And of course, which one you choose will really change how it plays. The first version is armed with the Belleros energy cannon, which I imagine is really designed to sit back and constantly lob fire into enemy positions, even when they think that they are safe. Infantry blobs, defensive emplacements, clustered units, this is the Disintegrator that I reckon will slowly bleed them out. With this, I don't think we are looking for big flashy kills, more to wear the enemy down, force them to move, and punish them every time they try to set up. The second version carries the Ferrumite cannon, and this one is supposed to be much more direct. I reckon that this is going to be the answer to enemy armor and elite units. It's going to hit harder, feel more aggressive, and actively contest the battlefield rather than just suppress it. So if the Belleros version is about control, I think the Ferrumite version is going to be about threat, putting something on the field that your opponent just can't ignore. Either way, alongside these guys march the Kataphron Breachers and Destroyers. They actually look relatively similar to each other, to be honest, because both roll onto the battlefield on tank tracks. It can be a little bit tricky to notice the difference, but they are designed to do completely different jobs in Warhammer 40k. Basically, these guys are cybernetic gun platforms made from condemned criminals and sacred machinery, but Games Workshop split them into two different battle roles: Destroyers, which focus on killing power, and Breachers, which focus on durability and control. We actually get to see them both in Dawn of War 4. The Kataphron Destroyers are all about ranged firepower. Their job is usually simple: sit back and delete enemy units with heavy guns. They are usually armed with plasma culverins or heavy grav cannons, which makes them excellent at dealing with elite infantry and vehicles. Now visually, Destroyers do indeed look like walking gun platforms. Their weapons are large and obvious, and their arms are relatively small and unimpressive. They aren't built for close combat, and they don't want to be anywhere near the enemy. If something tags them in melee, they probably will fall apart pretty quickly. In short, Destroyers want to stay safe, keep shooting, and let the rest of your army protect them. Now the Breachers, on the other hand, are of the opposite philosophy. They are not so much about deleting units from across the field, they are about walking forward, absorbing punishment, and refusing to die. Their obvious feature, to be honest, is their massive hydraulic or arc claw mounted on one of their arms. The claw is not just for show, of course. Breachers are legitimately dangerous in melee. They do also carry smaller guns like arc rifles or torsion cannons, which provide some decent shooting, but these aren't really the real reason that you bring out the unit. So basically, if Destroyers are glass cannons, Breachers are blunt instruments. The main way to tell them apart is seemingly that if the model has a huge industrial claw, then it is a Breacher. If it's mostly a gun and no claw, it's a Destroyer. And also, exposed wheels is usually a Destroyer, and the Breachers have them covered. If you want some raw damage output and you're building around shooting buffs, Destroyers will be your choice. But I guess if you think you will struggle to hold objectives or survive in the front lines, Breachers will probably do far more work for you. To be honest, I'm kind of excited to see an army with both of them together. Now, if you look even more closely on the right of your screen right now, you will see the Cognis Flamer for the Kataphron Destroyers. It's literally the only feature of that particular weapon upgrade in all of the trailer footage we have so far, but it just goes to show the huge customizability of the units in Dawn of War 4. Now, while these heavier vehicles are busy locking areas down, the Adeptus Mechanicus also brings speed into the equation with Iron Striders. These are essentially roaming gun platforms. They are always moving, always repositioning, and always looking for angles. I could see them being used to harass enemy vehicles, pick off isolated units, and apply pressure where your slower forces can't reach in time. Now, whilst we definitely see the Iron Striders in Dawn of War 4 trailers, we don't actually see the Sindonian Dragoons, which are kind of a almost variant of the Iron Striders with a different weapon loadout. These guys are armed with taser lances that look a little bit more like a melee version of the unit, but well, we don't see them in the trailers, and so I guess they might not feature in the game. A bit of a shame, but you never know, time will tell, maybe they could be revealed. Now, holding the mechanical war engine together are the Tech Priests, Engine Seers, and the Dominus Commanders, but we don't really see too much of these on the battlefield. But another key unit that is certainly worth mentioning are the Electro Priests. Where much of the Adeptus Mechanicus fight with cold precision, Electro Priests bring raw fanaticism. These are warriors that are obsessed with the motive force itself, hurling crackling electrical energy into the enemy at close range. They are fragile, but incredibly dangerous once they reach their target. It looks like they could be very useful for breaking stalemates, clearing contested objectives, and punishing tightly packed infantry. In a faction seemingly built around planning and control, Electro Priests feel like the moment where that careful setup can finally detonate. Now, at the very pinnacle of the Adeptus Mechanicus army has got to be the Imperial Knights. Towering above most units on the field, these colossal war engines are probably going to represent the ultimate expression of Mechanicus firepower, probably a tier 3 unit. I could easily see one of these knights obliterating armored units and leveling enemy bases but I imagine it would take a lot to be able to get one of these on the field in the first place. When you put all of this together, the Adeptus Mechanicus vehicle lineup feels less like a blunt armored force and more like a toolbox. The Adeptus Mechanicus are humanity's supreme custodians of technology. They worship the Omnisire, venerate ancient machines as holy relics, and willingly sacrifice flesh in pursuit of mechanical perfection. Where other factions see weapons and vehicles as tools, the Mechanicus see sacred constructs, and that belief shapes every aspect of how they wage war. Their armies blur the line between soldier and machine, fielding forces where consciousness and circuitry are inseparably fused. On the battlefield, the Adeptus Mechanicus are known for their technological supremacy, information warfare, and devastating ranged firepower. Their structures are not isolated buildings, but part of a living network known as the Noosphere. And so in Dawn of War 4, an obvious game mechanic would be that when buildings are placed close together, these installations generate powerful synergy buffs that perhaps enhance nearby units, encouraging careful base placement and forward expansion. As the network spreads, the faction is going to grow stronger, turning territory control into a weapon in its own right. Enemies could be forced to advance through layers of the network, with units fighting the battlefield itself as much as the army defending it. Now, we also know that information is one of the Adeptus Mechanicus's greatest advantages. In Dawn of War 4, they have been said to excel at detecting and tracking enemy movement, allowing players to anticipate attacks long before they arrive, apparently even through the fog of war, which I guess will be through things like battlefield scans. It looks like the Adeptus Mechanicus in Dawn of War 4 is a faction that wins through preparation and prediction, dismantling opponents methodically rather than overwhelming them with reckless aggression. So when it comes to the Adeptus Mechanicus in Dawn of War 4, it looks like we are getting two very different commander styles. First up is Potentia Delta 9, a techno-archaeologist whose role in the campaign seems relatively clear. She's been dispatched to Cronus to survey the planet for lost knowledge, ancient data vaults, forbidden tech, the usual Mechanicus wishlist. Then there's the second commander, and this is where things get more interesting. Thanks to a recent Instagram post, we now have a name which we really believe is going to be the second Adeptus Mechanicus commander, Marshal Sec 1X23. And unlike Delta 9, this guy sounds like a straight up battlefield commander. Sec 1X23 isn't about careful study or long rituals by the looks of it, because the name suggests that he is Skitarii focused, which probably means fast deployments, aggressive pushes, and tight battlefield coordination. If Delta 9 represents the knowledge-seeking side of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and potentially even the scouting side, it looks like Sec 1X23 represents the war machine side. Put simply, it looks like one commander digs up information from the past, or potentially the present, and the other turns present into a firing range. If Dawn of War 4 is leaning into distinct commander identities, then this pairing makes a lot of sense. You've got Potentia Delta 9, maybe for the players who like scouting and positioning, which seem to be part of the Adeptus Mechanicus's strengths, whereas Marshal Sec 1X23 may be for players who want to move fast and blast enemy armies from a distance. I'm pretty excited to see how it all turns out, of course, with the first time the Adeptus Mechanicus are officially coming to a real-time strategy game. Anyways, that is what I have been able to find out and talk about the Adeptus Mechanicus in Dawn of War 4, at least for now. Now, as you guys know, I often do read the comment section. In fact, I always do, because it's very interesting to see what you guys are talking about. What I definitely want to ask you all, though, is what on earth is happening here? Many of you will know I'm relatively new to the Warhammer franchise, and so it can be very tricky for me to understand exactly what's going on with everything, so a little bit of help here would be very much appreciated. Alongside that, though, with the commanders, what kind of abilities do you think that they will have? Of course, two very different ones. You've got Potentia Delta 9, and then Marshal Sec 1X23, say that 10 times, and also the Noosphere. Kind of curious to see what kind of mechanic that will bring for the Adeptus Mechanicus. Will it buff their units? Give them healing abilities maybe? I don't know really, but just let me know what you think it could be in the comment section below. I'm sure of course time will tell. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, make sure you are subscribed, and I'll see you guys on the next one.